The image of the U.S. cavalry charging into Lakota and Cheyenne warriors symbolizes the reckless arrogance of the Indian Wars. How could men on horseback survive against hundreds of native fighters armed with repeating rifles, bows, and intimate knowledge of the terrain? In truth, cavalry engagements weren't always suicidal, but at Little Bighorn, survival was a brutal lottery. Only a third of Custer's 7th Cavalry would escape death or grave injury that day. By 1876, the era of the horse soldier was fading, yet the U.S. Army still saw cavalry as its elite frontier force. These men had fought Comanche in Texas, chased Apache through Arizona, and now faced their greatest test, the gathered might of the Northern Plains tribes. In this video, we ride with the 7th Cavalry to uncover what survival truly demanded during Custer's last stand. Using soldier diaries, Lakota accounts, and hands-on experimentation, we'll reconstruct the chaos of mounted combat against impossible odds. In truth, cavalry operations in the 1876 campaign weren't always instant death traps, but they were far more dangerous than most people realize. Every ride into the Montana wilderness meant risking ambush, exhaustion, and a brutal end. For the men of the 7th Cavalry, survival, both for themselves and their horses, was never guaranteed. But you don't charge a village that size without a plan, and Custer didn't have one. By the time the smoke cleared, few would emerge unscathed, and the battle would mark the twilight of traditional U.S. cavalry glory. But in the years leading up to the Little Bighorn, mounted troops were still considered the elite strike force of the U.S. Army. These were seasoned men who had fought on the Great Plains for years, chasing raiding parties, escorting settlers, and patrolling hostile terrain. In this episode, we'll ride alongside them to uncover what life in the saddle was truly like during Custer's fateful 1876 campaign. Through historical accounts and hands-on insights, we'll piece together the reality of a cavalryman's fight for survival on the harsh and unpredictable frontier. We're joined today by living historians and cavalry reenactors to see just how grueling the training, patrols, and battlefield duties of the 7th Cavalry really were. How did men and horses survive days without proper water? How did they scout for enemies without becoming targets themselves? What weapons could they rely on, and what horrors did they face in return? And most importantly, what were the odds of making it out alive? Welcome to iRich History. Before we ride into history's most infamous last stand, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a journey into the untold past. Now, saddle up, because we're about to discover if you could survive in the cavalry at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Before we charge into the Valley of History, I want you to start imagining how you may survive in this infamous battle in the history of America. Whatever you think of cavalry glory, the summer of 1876 was its ultimate test. The U.S. Army had mobilized multiple columns to force the Sioux and Cheyenne back onto reservations after they refused to abandon the Black Hills. Among them rode the 7th Cavalry, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, confident, fast-moving, and eager to strike. They believed their speed and discipline could overpower any native resistance. In reality, the odds were stacked against them. Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors numbered in the thousands. They knew the land, could strike without warning, and were experts at mounted warfare. Cavalry charges may have looked heroic on paper, but one misstep in the broken hills and ravines could spell disaster. As the 7th Cavalry rode toward the Little Bighorn River, each man carried the tools of his trade. The Springfield Model, 1873 carbine, a Colt revolver, and a saber that, by this time, was rarely used in combat. Their survival depended on more than firepower. It depended on their horses, their stamina, and their ability to read the land before the land swallowed them whole. Cavalry life wasn't just about charging into battle. Soldiers acted as scouts, couriers, and even foragers for their mounts. In the rough country of Montana, a trooper might ride for hours, dismount to lead his exhausted horse, and still be expected to fight the moment the bugle sounded. Supply lines were thin, and water was scarce. Every man knew that a shot horse could mean death for its rider. The first tense moments of the campaign came not with a glorious charge, but with sudden, nerve-wracking encounters. Scouts and advanced patrols spotted signs of massive encampments along the river valleys. Smoke rose in the distance. Fresh pony tracks crisscrossed the plains. When the first small skirmishes erupted, soldiers discovered just how fast Lakota and Cheyenne warriors could appear, strike, and vanish. In one fateful moment, Custer divided his regiment into several detachments to strike the village from multiple directions, believing speed and surprise would carry the day. This decision would seal the fate of his command. Major Marcus Reno's battalion launched the first assault across the river, only to be met with overwhelming resistance. Warriors poured out of the sprawling encampment, firing rifles and arrows, while others flanked through the timber and high grass. Soldiers dismounted to form skirmish lines, using carbines to hold back the rush. 1 in 4 men acted as horse holders, leaving fewer rifles to face the onslaught. Within minutes, the clash devolved into chaos. The 7th Cavalry's training emphasized mounted speed and dismounted firepower, but against a force this large, the doctrine faltered. Meanwhile, Custer and his immediate command pressed further along the bluffs, unaware of the full scale of the village. By the time the fighting erupted on the ridges now known as Last Stand Hill, the regiment was surrounded. Warriors used the broken terrain as cover, moving fast between gullies and ravines, closing in from multiple sides. Gunfire, war cries, and the screams of horses filled the summer air. Could you survive in such a moment? A cavalryman's life at the Little Bighorn was a whirlwind of heat, dust, fear, and split-second decisions. You might fire a few desperate shots before being overrun, or you might survive only by breaking away to join Reno and Benteen's embattled survivors on the bluffs. Those who lived through the battle endured days under siege, short on water, watching the horizon for rescue. Horses that survived were just as battle-worn as their riders. Cavalry tactics of the 1870s demanded mobility, but at Little Bighorn, speed could not save them. Numbers, terrain, and surprise belonged to the Sioux and Cheyenne. The 7th Cavalry rode west believing in their invincibility. They were veterans of the Civil War and frontier skirmishes, armed with the latest government-issued gear. But their training ignored critical realities. 1. Outgunned, Lakota and Cheyenne warriors carried Henry and Winchester rifles, firing 3 times faster than the cavalry's Springfields. 2. Outmaneuvered, native fighters used the terrain like a weapon, flanking cavalry positions through hidden gullies. 3. Overconfident. Custer split his forces, against orders, assuming native warriors would scatter. They didn't. At the Little Bighorn, the cavalry didn't just fight warriors, they fought the land itself. Imagine these 3 scenarios on the battlefield. First ride with Custer, and you'd be surrounded and gone before the sun shifted in the sky. 2. Flee with Reno, and half your comrades would vanish into the cottonwoods. 3rd, stand with Benteen, and you might just hold out behind pack mules until help arrived. The U.S. cavalry rode into the valley with confidence, carrying the Springfield Model 1873 rifles. On the parade ground, these guns were dependable. In the chaos of battle, they betrayed their owners. Rapid fire caused the mechanisms to jam, forcing desperate soldiers to pry out stubborn shells with their knives while enemy warriors closed in. At close quarters, troopers relied on their Colt revolvers, powerful in the right hands, but a fleeting advantage. Ammunition was quickly spent, and when the smoke cleared from a revolver's last shot, there was no magic left in the weapon. As for their sabers, they were left behind entirely. Custer had decided they were useless against the swift, unpredictable fighting style of the Lakota and Cheyenne. Their opponents, armed with repeating rifles and skilled in lightning-fast shooting, could unleash a storm of bullets before a cavalryman had even finished reloading once. It wasn't just a battle of numbers, it was a battle of time, and the cavalry was losing it with every heartbeat. Had the outcome been different, had Custer won, the great Sioux reservation might have been swiftly dismantled, the Black Hills stripped for gold, and Sitting Bull's alliance broken apart. The legend of the cavalry's invincibility could have fueled even harsher campaigns across the frontier. But history chose another path. The Little Bighorn became a rallying cry for native warriors and a stark lesson to the U.S. Army. Never underestimate an enemy who fights with both skill and purpose. By the end of June 25, 1876, Custer and over 260 of his men were dead. The Battle of the Little Bighorn entered legend as Custer's last stand, a moment of both tragedy and defiance. For the cavalryman, survival was never about glory. It was about grit, instinct, and luck. So could you have survived in the cavalry during the Battle of the Little Bighorn? Would you have held the line, escaped the chaos, or vanished into history alongside Custer's doomed command? If you enjoyed this video, kindly subscribe and click the notification bell. Thanks for watching.